is a possibility here because he's really got that silk pajama thing going. He's got all the money he needs. He doesn't really need to do this fight financially. It's just about ego and about reputation. And if at some point, and he's an egomaniac, right? So he's gonna think I'll kill this guy. That's gonna be the rhetoric you always hear from a fighter. But when he's in a dark corner in the gym after a practice and he realizes he's not as crisp, he's not as fast, he's not there, and he's not feeling it the way he always did, he may pull out of the fight in some way, shape, or form. When who knows what kind of chaos can be created to do that? Does he come out and just say, "Hey, I got hurt," or this or that, or the other thing? I don't know, but I still stand by the comment I made on an earlier podcast when we talked about this: is that I believe that this fight will happen once we see them in the ring and the bells rung. Until then, I
All right, so it's Todd Atkins, and we're back the next day. Usually we don't tape back to back, but with the stuff unfolding right after we went off the air, within I'd say about 30 minutes, Dana White announced that the fight was off officially. Now Miguel's been saying the fight would never take place forever, and I want to give
got
you a
about a
chance
month.
to kind of.
Got about a month on it. You know what I mean? There was Connor is obviously, without question, the most successful MMA fighter that we've seen, especially if you just count bank account. You know what I mean? You might not be able to compare his legacy to John Jones's legacy or Fedor's legacy, but he's also gotten up there too. He's a two-division world champion. Um, he's lost a few fights, towards the end there and stuff. So I don't think he's in the GOAT discussion. But he's, especially once you include finances, he's the most successful MMA fighter that we've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And, we've talked about it with other people. We made the reference to Marvin Hagler's famous uh, quote about very hard to get up and do your road work at 5 in the morning when you're sleeping on silk sheets. And Connor's got
Silk sheets.
the best silk sheets, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, he's not lacking for anything. And he has evolved and changed in that, you know, less and less in the last 5 years have you seen him in a gym or in a gym format putting out video of him training or learning something or doing something. Usually you see him um in something the UFC created. He's a guy that, I mean, he's got jackets that the color orange that of the lines that run through them is matched to his beard. He's got tailors making his clothes and that's more and more the image that you see of him as a businessman, as an entrepreneur. That fighter thing got to be very distant, and that was a hunch feeling. I got to say, I feel lucky that I hit that one right too. It's good for BetStamp, as a sponsor. That and coming out 2-0 swinging here, with our betting stuff, it doesn't hurt us. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it
Miguel's
shows.
2 for 2 on his prop bets.
This one to me, just the hunch. I couldn't shake the feeling when you put my back to the wall and you said, what would you bet for this fight? I say I bet it doesn't happen, and lo and behold, there was still no footage of McGregor. And here's the other part of this: is who's the liar here? Sure, I think the UFC probably was like, "Oh fuck, this fight's falling apart." 2 weeks ago, they knew it.
Yeah.
When the press conference had it, they knew. But I could see them as a promoter having to sort of quash the news, sit on the news until we got the announcement of today, which
Right.
is what the replacement fights are.
Last night. Late
Yes, last
last
night.
night. It was kind of buried, actually.
But that's okay because Jiri and Pereira is a good rematch. Jiri to me still is one of the most exciting guys they have on the roster. So I'm not. They did what they could. but they do have to put that stuff together to now have the announcement. They can't just say, "Well, the fight's canceled." We went so far as to suspect that the UFC 303 might go by the wayside, and this is a strong move by the UFC in that the show must go on. The only shows I've ever canceled, I've canceled two shows in my life in about 200 shows that we did. One of them was the week of 9/11, or it was the following week, right? People couldn't even fly. And the other one was here in Costa Rica, where the venue we were having a show at had a heavy metal concert the week before. Some of the people outside broke windows in the neighborhood and stuff, and the venue lost their insurance. So it wasn't even me that canceled it. We actually had another venue that took, we could have made the show at, but it was 40 miles away on the other side of town. And, tickets and sales and things like that, it wasn't going to work out. So we were better off. Those are the only times I've canceled the show. The show needs to be sacred and must happen no matter what. If you lose the main event, you got to come up with another main event. So I could see that Dana has been and the UFC brass have been a major scramble trying to make this happen, trying to announce good fights, and they've done a decent job with that. So the show goes on. It's fight week. It doesn't have the McGregor name. You could argue Chandler's a bigger name than Jiri. I don't know. Alex has gotten to be a pretty big star with his success over the last little bit of time and stuff. So, but I don't, Alex isn't a soundbite guy like Connor was. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think there's a little less gloss on it, but the UFC was beholden to not only cancel the fight. If they were going to cancel the show, that would have been news. But once they say McGregor's off, they do have to at the same time make the announcement. So I can't really say that the UFC has mishandled this. I think they were putting, they want McGregor to fight. So they've done what they need to do. So to criticize them, I think would be wrong. The one part that is critical to me here is that, and there's always controversies. Like, a fighter is hurt and he doesn't want what type of injury it is because his future opponents and stuff. None of that plays in with McGregor. What is this injury? Did he break his leg again? Was he going to show up at the press conference on crutches where everybody would have known? So that's why they canceled it. I have a idea to present that gives you an alternate thing, and it could be part of the reason why the UFC, really hasn't come out and said anything super critical about them, and that's because they could be hiding something controversial like a failed drug test. The UFC probably doesn't like, with the Lesnar Hunt situation in the past and other things, they might even try to work around that and stuff. But who knows what we're dealing with Connor, because Connor is just that. Like I said, he's an entrepreneur now. He's gone beyond the fighting game and stuff like that. We've seen him this year in interviews where it's highly likely that he's on some kind of substance that's beyond alcohol. During that series of interviews when we were talking about that, one of our fans, a shout out to him, I don't remember the name, but one of our fans very correctly called him out as also a potential steroid abuser. So there's a whole gamut of things there that he could be messed up on. And whatever the new drug testing that the UFC does and things like that, it's now more in-house, or, it's not an outside body or anything like that. So, yeah, they can maybe – that would be wrong, I think, to keep that quiet. They just suspended poor – is it Walt Davis? Is it
No,
Walt
it was
Harris?
Walt Harris for a long period of time, but they
Yeah,
also
yeah. Walt Harris is the guy that just immediately came to mind to me. Is that they suspended him for drug testing and stuff? So now the bottom line is if that's the case, then McGregor should suffer the same fate. If not, what is the injury? Because again, he's going to need to be cleared. It's the knee, it's the elbow, it's the he suffered a concussion. He can't fight. If he got knocked out in practice, yeah, you probably can't fight in 2 weeks. You know what I mean? 3 weeks or whatever the time frame is.
right.
And there are different levels of seriousness, but the way it was handled, the quietness seems to be Connor still enjoying a little bit of a protected status. You know what I mean? They're not calling them out. They're not saying, Dana's been mad at fighters
Yeah,
who
he
get
usually
hurt.
will say this guy's afraid to fight. That's
Yeah,
usually his line.
and even before, I remember, oh God, it was a Lions Den guy in Atlantic City, and he got cut Thursday before the weigh-ins, practicing the last practice with his teammates. He takes a knee and gets cut, and Dana shits on those guys. I think
Yeah.
that may have actually been the first.
Oliveira before he was supposed to fight
Yeah. But I think the show I'm referring to is so old that I think it's actually the first Fertitta and Dana White run UFC in Atlantic City
because
in
there's
the
actually a
30s.
thing that maybe we can talk about in the future, but there's a documentary they put out. I don't know if you've seen clips of this, called Fight Inc. And it's got behind the scenes of Dana and Hunter Campbell and them talking about Charles getting cut. Dana was pretty mad, obviously, but it showed a lot of Hunter Campbell, which kind of makes me wonder if they're introducing the fans to the guy who's going to take over for Dana.
How much younger is Hunter
Because
than Dana?
it
Is he
really
20
seemed
years
like
younger?
Campbell was the one running the deals and not Dana.
I, you know, what fighter was it? It was Corey something, Corey Anderson. And I think Corey Anderson was on the Bellator roster. But when he went to UFC, he was vying for a title shot. And they were like, "You don't move the needle enough. Maybe we." I think Corey's a guy who actually kind of trashed Johnny Walker's career by knocking him out because they were forcing him to fight Johnny Walker. And he had to sit down with Hunter, and Hunter was the one who told him, "You don't move the needle. If you beat Johnny, we'll get you on a path where you get your Instagram up and things like that." But yeah, those types of conversations come with Hunter. So Hunter does wield some power. I don't know him well enough to know Dana's in his 50s now. Is Hunter Campbell a guy who's 35? Is he 20 years younger? That would make him pretty clearly here apparent. If they're around the same age, then you've got a little bit more of a two-headed structure there, and probably something where Dana and Hunter have hit it off. There's respect there, and Dana has accepted a guy, to be his B guy, or to be like that. Still, I haven't seen. There have been times where they go overseas and Hunter's gone to the show and Dana's stayed away. Very rare. And Dana's still the face of most of the conversations there. But Hunter Campbell would seem to be a reasonable number two guy there. But Hunter's never going to be the guy. It's not like we were going to hear from Hunter. Well, Connor broke his leg, or Connor blew hot for cocaine, or whatever. And a cocaine, again, there's speculation. But blowing hot for cocaine would be extremely problematic in that the drug stays in your system for only a couple of days, which would mean that he's still actively using it. It's not like, like one of those tests where it's like, well, he had stopped using it, and there are micro pieces of it still popping up once in a while in the test and things. Cocaine test doesn't work that way. So
I'm trying to
we'll
see
see.
if I can find his age, but it's hard. I'd assume he's younger than Dana significantly, just by looking at him.
Yeah, so maybe if he's a 35-year-old, then yeah, then he's going to be the next guy when Dana's gone. But yeah,
He had a very prominent role in this behind the scenes documentary, so people are speculating that maybe Dana might be
well,
stepping down sooner rather
I
than
don't want
later.
to. I don't want to over talk, right? But Hunter's actually a lawyer, right? Dana's
Correct.
not.
Correct.
So that has some gravitas, especially for the future. You know what I mean? It's like we've seen the company slanting towards a more corporate approach almost all the time. And, it's not a situation like WWE where another Hunter, right? Hunter Hurst, Helmsley, Triple H,
Yeah.
another Hunter got in there and he became the heir apparent. Because you don't have a fighter who can take over this company. You know what I mean? So it works differently there. It wouldn't surprise me if they went like that with a lawyer. So
Yeah, that makes
yeah,
sense.
that's a little bit little bit of an interesting twist that's been out there for a little bit of time and so. But I still see Dana as being like a Bob Arum type, where 80 years old, he's still going to be bothering people and screaming about matches and things like that, and Hunter's going to be waiting.
Now, I want to focus on something because this is kind of, the theme of the show for me is when does it become unethical to lead the fans on?
Again, I
Because there are fans who've probably bought airplane tickets, hotels, all that stuff.
but you can't. He's. We now know it's an injury, right? That's what's the only word that's out there. So
That's what
we know
Errol saying, and I don't necessarily take him serious.
I think on MMA Junkie they said that he's injured also, and there's speculation about it, whatever. But nobody's come out and said what the injury is. But because the press conference is now canceled for a couple of weeks, they know he's been injured. But again, if they announce it, then that deflation of that, I think that it's not unethical what they did, even though some people are going to be upset about it. But I think that you need to give them a couple of weeks time to tell you what it is that they're going to do. And with the fights that they announced as replacements, they were working. You know what I mean? I think Pereira and Chaka is a great fight. I think that they would have benefited from having a few months to promote that as well. This is not the optimal way to do that fight.
Yeah.
And they needed to put something on top of it. Again, I don't think the 145 pounders were going to be, a good replacement total main event. I think they needed to do something big. Pereira stepping up. Prochaska obviously wanted his rematch. You know what I mean? But they could have milked that fight for September and built it up a little bit different. This isn't the optimal way to present it, but they need to tell the fans this is what you're going to get. And and the way the business works now is I don't think you can make the phone calls and be like, all right, we got a verbal deal, fax me back the contract. So, it's like it takes 10 days or so to make it all happen for everybody to be content. Pereira, I think I read somewhere where against Hill, where he had a spectacular performance and got out. You would think it was a short fight, so it was maybe he got out unscathed. But I read he broke some toes. So if he had toes broken, he had to go get checked out and be like, okay, am I going to be okay? What are we going to do? Tape it up? They're big enough that they can't just overnight have the main events ready. So, and you can't just say the fight's off. We'll let you know what we're going to do here in a bit. They do have to wait and give you both pieces of news at the same time. That's just I think that's logical on their part.
How many people do you think a lot of people ask for a refund, and how many would it take for them to consider canceling the show?
No, the show must go on now, even if even if the gig, even if 15 million of the 20 million that they have in the door already has to go back, then it becomes a lesser selling pay-per-view, but you got to eat that. Again, there's nothing more treacherous than canceling the show and just not delivering. People will show up. People will show up. At the end of the day, maybe the Irish fans will stay home. Guys flying from Ireland, they're like, and that is a little bit of a different story. And those guys do show up in numbers, But at the end of the day, hey, it's a weekend in Vegas. Guys, going to the fights and things like that. Those all become events and things like that. So, I don't think, and this main event has the potential to be a really good fight. So, yeah, I don't think it'll suffer. It'll certainly be smaller, but it's also International Fight Week, So the guys are going to be, they can be there. They're going to meet fighters and get autographs, and there's other things going on around the show. So I don't. Yeah, I think that's why you had to announce what the alternative is going to be. Because you got to be like, okay, Conor's done. Okay, now it's official. What are we going to do? Here are the fights. And now people can make that decision. If they announced it 2 weeks ago that Conor was off and then waited for 2 weeks, you've got other people sitting there going, I'm not going. That up and down emotion. Now the questions are answered. So, yeah, I think the person here that has the most to answer is Conor. What is the injury? Like I said, there's an outside chance it's a drug test. I don't think anybody's mentioned anything like that and stuff like that. If not, what is the injury? Where'd you screw up in training?
And also,
So
he didn't really clue anybody in that he wasn't going to fight. He played right along till the last minute, just like UFC
yeah,
did.
I think there they had to make an organized plan. The UFC's like, all right, Connor, shut up. We're working on replacing you, and just do the right thing at this point because you failed to do the right thing getting it here. You know what I mean? So do the right thing, keep your mouth shut, and we'll announce the replacement. We'll announce everything together. But
Now, they're talking about moving the fight down the road. Do you think that materializes or no?
I just saw too where Daniel Cormier suggested to Chandler to move on. I think if you look back at our podcast, I've been suggesting that he move on, since the TV show, because Chael said it too. The chances of seeing Connor go down again in the octagon go down every incident like this. This isn't the first time he's canceled the show. Not in the USADA testing pool, films a TV show, everybody plays along. The fight doesn't happen September, October timeframe. After that, all the USADA stuff goes down, and you start hearing the rumors. First, he's healthy. He's talking about how he's ready and he wants to come back. January, February. February's the Super Bowl shows. Those were big shows. Right there is the time to present them. Again, nothing happened. They moved it off. We heard November. And then they announced this June show. So, yeah, now they're going to tell us November again, maybe. But the chances of it actually happening become less and less in people's eyes. People will trust it less.
Plus, I think fans, I think the problem with a lot of, and even some of these media people, is they're looking at McGregor as the original person. He's not that anymore. He's not that as a fighter. He's not that as a person. He doesn't need this fight financially. He doesn't need it competitively. He doesn't need it for any reason. Most of the time when guys fight when they're not ready, it's because they need the money or they haven't fulfilled themselves competitively. He's done that. He's not going to get back to being a 2 division world champion. He knows that. He's not the same fight. And most, like Anderson Silva, Chris Weidman, the guys who had similar injuries to him, they were never the same. And he knows he's not going to be the same, like you said. And that's probably the bigger part of it. He knows he's not as good as he was. He knows he's not can't do the same things he used to do. And that's
This
the
is
bigger
where,
problem for him.
and we've mentioned this in these podcasts when we've talked about the Connor subject already. And I still strongly feel that if you want to blame the UFC for something, it's this game of Chandler. For 2 years now, we've been hearing about this fight. Like it's the be all end all. And Chandler's a good name, but he's got I think a 2-3 UFC record. It's not the optimal opponent. So what was the plan for Connor? If you're gonna how you go to a guy like Connor, like you said, that has gone into the stratosphere with all kinds of different projects and things. His legacy's already established, what would satisfy him? What would motivate him? I just took him out in the beginning of this podcast. I took him out of the GOAT argument. If he were to win a third world championship in a third weight class, and this fight was at 170, you tell him you beat Chandler. The plan is for you and Leon Edwards to fight for the title in November. Would that be enough to motivate him? That plan could be made public. And, you need to do something like that if you have any chance at motivating him, because there's fight to fight. Chandler, like we said, Chandler wasn't perfect. Could they, then you could speculate whatever. would St. Pierre come back to fight him? Would Khabib ever come back to fight him? Khabib's another guy who's probably gotten to the point where he's financially comfortable and is mentally strong enough that he, I think, needs fighting less than Conor does.
Right.
So, but what would be a third division? I don't know if anybody's ever won 3 weight class championships in the UFC. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anybody.
Nobody.
That would put him into that situation of like, you need something like that to motivate the guy, because what they did was not it, you know. And again, then you're talking about him not only stringing along Chandler, but then stringing along Leon Edwards. Now he's injured. Now you got to move this, and then the plan for the big London show with Leon and him, you got to move that out and stuff like that. But again, maybe he would have taken it more seriously. Maybe his training wouldn't have been so bad, to the point where he got hurt, or maybe he wouldn't have. If that had been the plan all along, fight Chandler, and then you're in a 170-pound title fight, maybe he wouldn't have gotten on dope. Maybe he would have even put Roadhouse, which was a good deal for him. He made money. It's at the end of the day, the movie was a blip on the radar. It wasn't anything huge, but it was a good deal for him. But at the end of the day, he might have said no to the movie career with the motivation of a third world championship. That's why, maybe they talked about something like that with him, but it doesn't seem like that. Leon would have to know too, and Leon's a guy I think that, that they don't care too much about. So if you could have gotten to Leon as well, they put him through a long streak before even giving him a title shot, et cetera, et cetera. But if you could have gone to Leon and go, okay, look, we're going to reward you. You're going to get a McGregor fight in London. He's going to go for his third world championship. You're going to defend England versus Ireland. We're going to throw everything at it. Then you've got an extremely motivated champion again. And Leon, I think at this point, is he's waiting for his next fight, just like normal, but in limbo at times. So I think that plan, if they didn't think about it, well, they should have.
Plus, I'm looking up this thing right now because I wanted to make this point. I know these net worths, we can't take them necessarily as accurate, but here it says has a $200 million net worth. What could what could the UFC afford to pay that would even motivate him to fight?
He made it. He might be worth more than that if you evaluate the whiskey companies and things, and you consider that he probably made $100 million with the Mayweather fight.
But he spent some of that, I'm sure. Yachts.
Yeah, and Dustin, I think with the Poirier fights and things like that, I think at the end of the day, he's probably been bagging about $30 million per fight, and $30 million might be enough to just get it, sock it away. I remember when Bodog entered the fight game, the rumor was that, well, there was all kinds of lore behind it, right? The bottom line is that Calvin, the owner of Bodog, wrote some of the code that allowed you to play poker online and set up the casinos online. There are different versions of this code, but he owns one of them. He made it himself. And he said, hey, I just want to get $10 million and retire. And he made $10 million in a week. Right? So that changes the ball game there a little bit, right? At the end of the day, by the time he got into the fight game, the rumor was that his bookkeepers had told him, hey, we've got this account here with $55 million that's not being touched, not being used. And that became Bodog Entertainment. Maybe, maybe not. But the point is he could take another $30 million payday. Conor couldn't just sock it away.
Where is Calvin now? Is he in jail?
No. I think he's still. I think Bodog is owned by an entity now like Endeavor or things like that. Like it's become a lot more corporate, but I think he still has his hands in there.
Yeah. That's the thing though. It's not just paying him enough to make him do that walk. It's paying him enough to get him in the gym every day to get ready for that. And like you said,
Yeah, I think the secret
He
to that
doesn't
was
believe he can get ready because of the injury. That's an injury you can't be the same
well,
after.
well, I mean, Kobe Bryant did okay, and I mean, you're talking about different types of athletes and things like that, and it's hard. I think the key there was what I talked about with something like Leon Edwards. This is just my speculation, but McGregor at one point will tell you he's the greatest fighter of all time, and
Right.
now, right now, like that, he kind of sounds like Ronda, which is just talking, blowing smoke because he's not in anybody's eyes, not even in the Irish fans' eyes. Maybe the greatest Irish fighter right now. You know what I mean? But he's not in the John Jones, Demetrius Johnson, Fedor category. But with a third, if you've been talking to him about getting yourself to that level and ending with your legacy as being one of the GOATs with 3 world championships in the UFC in 3 different weight classes, makes him unique over everybody else. Then maybe some of the extracurricular activities could have been tailored down a little bit, but they didn't control it that way. They let him go spin off out of control, and then this is what you get: him doing movies and yacht trips and going to Vegas to film the show and not delivering on the fights, and everybody forgives him, and a real strict plan of here's your next set of fights with what it means to this. And again, you know, Leon is not the huge needle mover, but Leon's been a good champion. And doing that fight in Wembley Stadium might approach another $75 million payday for Connor. They could have tried to do something very, very big. Combine it with Jones and Aspinall, and you could sell out a 90,000 seat football arena
Yeah,
in England.
I agree with you. It would be a huge fight. But the thing is, for me, like I heard Poirier say the other day, I can't train twice a day anymore. He has to be smarter about the way he trains. Poirier said
That's
that. I
why
can't
that's
I
why
can't
the
do he said I used to be able to train twice a day easy.
that's why this fell apart on them, is because to have to retain some control over they lost control of Connor a long time ago. And the thing is you always need your hooks into him. And by having a real good plan with a title shot, motivation, things like that, that's your only shot. And then the money comes, and that also motivates him, so he makes more money and stuff like that. But he's not out of he's out there still in the fight game with a plan. And so they lost their hooks on him a long time ago by being like, Chandler filming the TV show. Yeah, and then what? What's next? What comes after that? That's how you could have motivated him. And you got to be a few steps ahead in the UFC. Does that on a corporate level, in that, if you look at the calendar, they probably got 10 shows announced with some fights, in some of those shows and stuff like that. But on a case by case basis, they let this guy get away.
The fight that he's always wanted, or it just seems to me that way, is he always wanted a third Diaz fight. One, because he thinks he can win it, and two, because he thinks, it's just as big as fighting Chandler. But fighting Chandler would be tougher.
Yeah, Diaz is another guy that maybe was in the mix and stuff like that. But again, I think the way would have been for 2 or 3 since Leon Edwards has been champion. They should have been trying to set up, especially after McGregor was injured, and you knew he was going to probably not want to fight at 155 anymore. That should have always been the plan. It should have always been something that was communicated to Leon and to McGregor, and to keep the guys in line. Hey guys, we got a plan. We're going to make a big fight, Wembley Stadium. Yeah, and the UFC does have a history of having that sort of planning at times when they want to do something. But it seems more and more like that they become more cookie cutter. It's like they've got the 10 shows and lined up in there and stuff like that. And here is a perfect situation. They have let McGregor get the hooks off him. Get the hooks off of him. And with Jones to a certain extent too. They really have the top guys on the roster kind of in limbo. Goes back to Stipe too. They never treated Stipe well, right?
Right.
So once you break into the biggest paydays, it's almost like they're aloof with you nowadays.
I'd say
So
that's true of any job. Once you start making a good amount, any job doesn't. They want to get somebody else in there who doesn't make what you make.
yeah, except for I mean, with some of those guys, McGregor is especially the guy that the UFC will be taking home an exceptionally good payday for themselves as well.
Right.
And that's why they should have had a little more attention on it. You know, like I said, there's my plan. That's what I would have been doing. So for the last 2 years, McGregor would have known that. All right, Chandler. I'm not even enamored with Chandler. I think I might have done Diaz. I don't think that's a great fight. Maybe the Poirier fight, but then you run the risk of McGregor losing it. So okay, so we got Chandler. You do Chandler, and then boom, immediately you announce at the end of this year, Leon Edwards and him in Wembley Stadium for 170-pound title, leaving McGregor with the possibility of becoming the first ever UFC fighter to win three world titles in three different weight classes.
Connor wasn't beating Chandler. Chandler was going to run him over. You saw how hard he was preparing. Connor doesn't
Yeah,
have that in him to prepare like that.
here's the thing: is
Chandler was
you
training like his life was on the line to win this
you
fight.
you've got to do it in the ring. You can't. You can be of the opinion that Chandler was going to win, and I respect that. I don't have a problem with it. I do think at this point it meant more to Chandler, and Chandler is a professional that has always carried himself well, and this was a huge opportunity for him.
Plus, with that
But
kind of injury, your core, it's going to be harder to block the takedowns and stuff when you got an injury like that.
how many takedowns did Jose Aldo get? Didn't
No,
take anything.
no,
If
I'm
Chandler
talking
comes,
about the injury that McGregor had, and you're fighting a guy with the wrestling chops that Chandler has. It's going to be harder to defend the takedown.
no, like I say, what I mentioned the Aldo fight for is because if Chandler decides to come in and try to swing and makes a mistake,
Right.
it could be over very fast.
You're right.
And Chandler is a poor matchup in terms of body stature. He's a short, stocky guy, and McGregor's a long guy with long arms and stuff. So if they both throw a punch at the same time, McGregor's going to land first. And McGregor not only did that to Aldo, Aldo really wasn't. Aldo is a better body type to fight McGregor than Chandler. And Chandler, because Aldo screwed up mentally in the fight. McGregor had that one before. But it's the Alvarez fight that I point to because Alvarez is a good fighter. He's a world champion fighter in multiple organizations. He was Chandler's main rival for a long time. They went back and forth, but they're both very physically the same. And McGregor didn't break Eddie Alvarez the same way that he did Aldo. He beat him up over the course of time. So he hurts him early. Chandler comes in, gets hurt early, and then that's Connor's fight. So I think that that's what I always looked at by their stoic need to have Chandler do the fight is that stylistically, matchup wise, unless Chandler wants to come in, try to get the takedown and just grind him out like what Khabib would do. But that's not Chandler's style, really. Chandler is a guy who's going to want to throw. Therefore, McGregor was always going to have a chance. McGregor, for all his faults, and I'm not a huge fan of him, but for all his faults, he is among the most precise strikers we've ever seen in MMA.
He is, but like the two Poirier fights, he never hurt Poirier in either fight.
Yeah,
And those
yeah,
were standing fights for most of the fight.
but Poirier is much longer and bigger than Chandler.
Yeah. But maybe
And you're
maybe
asking,
McGregor
and
doesn't have that pop
and
anymore.
maybe not. Yeah, that's why you got to do it in the ring. But the problem to me with Chandler is, on top of everything else, you're asking Chandler to blow up 15 more pounds. That'll slow you down.
It will. I just think he would have took him down and smashed his face in, and
It
that
it it, it would have been nice to see. It would have been
no.
nice to see. And for Chandler, like I think Chandler's a soldier type of guy. Um, you wish the success, but I like I said, I enjoyed the Bellator rivalry between Chandler and Alvarez, and I think
Yeah.
I think they fought 3 times. I think Alvarez may be 2-1 against him, or the thing is that was a stalemate. Those guys could have fought 10 more times, and it would have gone 50-50 probably because they're very evenly matched, and that scares me. And again, I don't like short stocky guys against McGregor.
Yeah, even John McCarthy, I was listening to him and he said if you're gonna have someone else fight Chandler, sign Alvarez, let them fight again. The
I
fans will
think
get it. The fans will get a show. That's what he was saying. If those two guys fight, the fans will get a show.
I mean I think Eddie's done.
Even
I don't
bare
know if you,
knuckle.
well, he actually, if you, did you see it? Did you see his last bare knuckle fight?
Hmm.
Okay, but yeah, I did. I watched it because I mean I went to Eddie's wedding. I know the guy and I always root for him. And he probably was up 2 rounds to nothing on Perry. He beat Perry up in spots in the fight. Perry's a guy who never stops coming forward and stuff like that. And they threw in the towel and he didn't come out for round 3. He was hurt. He also got hurt. Bare knuckle can be very rough, and I think that is not a good way. Maybe he said gets motivated and wants to come out and do one more fight because he doesn't want to go out that way. But I think that's also a sign he's got to be in his mid to late 30s also at this point,
Mm-hmm.
not the young kid anymore. And he was, in my opinion, one more round away. The last 2 rounds went, and the judges will probably have to give the fight to Alvarez. Maybe we watch it again, and I was off on my viewing or whatever, but that was the last impression. Was I was like, he may have this fight, and then he quits on the stool. So I don't think he's the right guy to come back for a fight with Chandler. I think you need a horse
Yeah.
of a different nature.
Apparently there was some talks with Holloway, but it didn't go far at all.
The weight class isn't a match.
Right.
You can't have Holloway at 170 and Chandler dropping back down to Alvarez. At least has fought at 170 many times in his career.
Mm-hmm.
But Chandler, with 3 weeks' notice, it's like, hey, I've been preparing to fight at 170, which means he's probably at 180 now. Going to do a little 10-pound cut, get himself strong. So now to tell him, hey, you got to go to 155, I'd say no too.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. I mean, you nailed this prediction again, and it's crazy events with all the speculation and of people doing that. But I think for the people who had a brain or had an IQ, they didn't feel like he was going to fight ever. I think there was a handful of people like that, and old heads
The
mostly.
signs are there. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's like the Roadhouse movie exposes you to a very different type of celebrity also.
Right.
You know what I mean? And again, it becomes harder and harder to do the motivation. Like you said, when you like I say, I respect you may be right in that if he can't be the same, he's not even going to be able to throw the punches accurately because his leg and the training and everything never showed up again. Yeah, and then I don't know that we need to go through this whole charade.
Right.
But I think there has been a certain amount of smoke and mirrors where he wanted to fight because that's where he got his start, and he doesn't want to say he's not a fighter. He's moving. I'm a movie star now. That's not. I'm a whiskey entrepreneur now. No, he's always going to want to say I'm a fighter.
You think so?
But
To me,
yeah, I think so.
he seems to enjoy the limelight. I think he doesn't
Oh,
mind
he does.
being just a celebrity and that's it.
He does. I don't know because punching everybody from guys in Italian hotels to old men and stuff like that. I think especially if he's got a little whiskey in him and stuff like that, he still thinks of himself as a fighter first.
Well, that's enough though. He gets what he needs, beating up people that can't fight back, and then he can still be the entrepreneur most of the time.
Yeah, yeah. At this point, who knows when we'll see him again, and who knows when he returns to a spotlight or having a voice in the media and stuff. What is going to be his message? Because the last words we heard from him were, "I look forward to giving you the greatest show on earth in the octagon."
Yeah.
And that really doesn't that sounds hollow at this point. So that Leon Edwards decision, which could have been made, and you could have charted out a plan for him that tried to keep him in line and motivated over a period of time. Now you need that more than ever. They make exceptions for him. They could go right to the Leon Edwards fight and give him a shot at the title and see if that motivates him. We'll see. We'll see. But when Conor comes back out of whatever hole he's in right now, it'll be interesting to see what his presentation is. Humility is not really in his game either. It's not like he's going to say, "Man, I'm so sorry." So
Right,
we'll
but
see. We'll see
like
how they begin to present it, and then you'll know a lot. Because if you start hearing the same old rhetoric, and he comes out with his stupid yells and things like he did when he was 25, then I will be less likely to think that we're ever going to see him fight again.
like the second time he fought Poirier. I'm sorry, the third time, because he did fight him once when he was younger. But he said he was going to kill him in the octagon and all this kind of nonsense. And when they fought, he didn't look like a guy who believed he could do that.
You know, it just I think Poirier is a better fighter than Chandler, and he's bigger. I think it's a different matchup.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to disrespect Chandler, but Poirier is the body type, and now like now he's a little bit worn out because he's been through some wars. But him at the peak of his powers, I think he's a better fighter than Chandler.
Right. But when I saw him take Conor McGregor down, and that third fight is where he took him down more, before the injury. He took him at the start. I think, was it the third round where Conor got injured or the second? But he started the fight out by taking him down.
I thought it was
You know,
earlier, but I don't
and
remember.
so I'm like, if Poirier's taking this guy down before he got injured, Chandler's gonna have no problem putting this guy on the ground if he uses his brain.
Yeah, and that's the thing is Chandler's in a weird situation. Also because he likes to slug it out. He's got that reputation of being a crowd pleaser. So if he comes out and hug fests him, does it serve him well, or does he make that mistake? That's what would need to play out. And then you're giving Conor certain advantages because of the body type, as I've mentioned already. But if he comes out and wants to, wrestle fuck him, sorry to be offensive, but you know what I mean?
No, I think
Then
it would be accept if he took him down and smashed him to pieces. I think people would have no problem with
yeah. He'd have to smash him to pieces.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll see. Anyway, it's been fun, Todd, as always.
Grind him into fine powder. I think they would accept that. But yeah, I mean, this whole situation leading up to has been comical, but you nailed it again. And I even put on Twitter, you guys that bet out here, you might want to look in Miguel's direction.
Like I said, betting is an interesting game. If you like what I say and you want to bet along with me, we'll see how much you cash in. And if you think I'm crazy and you don't like then you just bet against me and you'll win. You know what I mean? So far I'm doing all right. we can start looking around maybe for this Jiri Pereira fight. That's not an easy fight to pick.
Right.
Pereira's obviously, I think, going to be the favorite walking in, and we'll look at the numbers and things like that. But I think Pereira, skill wise, is I mentioned Connor. Pereira might be the most accurate and best striker in MMA.
And he might
Not
be the first guy to win 3 belts because he's big enough to go up to heavyweight.
Yeah, and they're but I think the way to approach Pereira is with some confidence. I think Jerry doesn't lack for confidence. And I think the other thing that I would like to bring to the table is being weird and unorthodox. I wouldn't want to go at him with a straight A. We're going to stand in front of each other and kickbox, because Pereira will probably win a kickboxing style match.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do some unorthodox, interesting stuff, maybe that's an X factor. So I like him, and I think Jiri is also one of the problem is you talk about an Eastern European guy against a Brazilian guy. Nobody's going to give you the quotes that Conor McGregor was going to give you. And on top of that, they're with their history and everything, they're likely to probably be very professional about with a translator telling you, oh, we're going to give you a good fight. So you don't have that poster board type of Conor madness coming up. But I think overall it's a good fight. Pereira growing is a favorite, and we'll see. We'll see what you pick. We'll see what we pick. You can see if I can keep the streak going.
Pereira and Smith in the same press conference could be interesting because Smith was very critical of him, saying Smith was saying, "Oh, I could beat him on the ground," and Pereira got pretty mad about that, and they kind of went
Here's
back and forth a little
the,
bit. So I think
the,
having them at the same press conference might be interesting.
it's hard to get into the mentality of fighters because when they're not confident, it has an effect. So I'm okay with Hill saying I can beat
Smith,
him, or
Smith.
or Smith. Yep.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, he was another guy with 10 fights being rushed into a title shot. And those guys, I do think, need to put in more work. So we'll see. Pereira also doesn't have a lot of MMA fights, but hey, he showed up a pretty polished fighter. We saw that already.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of experience, and that is his strong point. Other than obviously technical wise and everything like that, his strong point is, I think, mental toughness. I
Yeah.
think none of his opponents have ever really gotten into his head.
Yeah.
Adesanya and him had a nice rivalry kind of thing,
Mhm.
and that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, he's winning that rivalry.
Yeah.
Adesanya is off painting his toes still.
And you can tell he wants to be in there. When he gets
Yeah,
in there, he wants to be there.
he's got
Yeah.
a very old school Marco Ruas, old Brazilian mentality of, I'm lucky to be doing this, because if not, I'd be doing it on a beach or in under a bridge in Rio, not getting paid. So yeah, I think he's also grateful, and seems to be, I don't know for sure, but seems to also be a guy without vices, like like he
Right.
doesn't like to party whiskey, or he's not out blowing his money and things like that. So I think in Pereira we could also be looking at a guy who's pretty special. We'll
Yeah.
see. They replaced Connor, who back in the Aldo days and the Eddie Alvarez days, maybe was one of the best strikers we'd ever seen, with this guy who's a 2.0 version. He's the best striker in MMA right now.
Yeah. Well, Miguel, as always, it's a great talking to you, and I'll let you give another update on the MMA collector. I know you talked about last night, but if you have
Yeah,
some more to
it's
add.
like I said, I know nothing. We got some guests lined up for the weekend. Me and you are already talking about a couple of different interviews that we want to get fashion and get back on track there. And, not more to say. Just MMA Collector 74 on YouTube. Check it out.
Yeah. And
MMA history.
and also the dog rescue. I know you gave us an update last night.
Yep, same old thing. I got Blackie here behind me, and I got Poncho over there by the door whining. So I'm gonna go try to take care of those two
All
guys.
right. All right, man.
Take him out for a walk. All right,
Yeah.
brother.
great talking to you. Everybody who checked out the episode, subscribe, support Miguel's projects. Until next time, we'll see you later.
Live to Fight is the type of company that Dana killed. It's a homegrown, it's a guy that just does good work and, puts it out there. And if you can support him, you really should, because he's precisely a guy who can't, his banners may not be able to hang on the UFC because he hasn't been able to pay them $100,000 to get his stuff out there. That's the corporate stuff that we're talking about now with the UFC, that, they've made everything at that level where it's all about money for them. And Live to Fight is a dude that does good work, makes you a great banner, and, doesn't have $100,000 to get on the UFC and stuff, and deserves support. So any fighter out there, anybody out there, owner of a gym or anything like that listens to us, God bless you and thank you very much for your support. And extend that to Live to Fight, because he's one of us. Those guys are one of us.